Have you ever felt stuck in life, wondering what your next step should be? Although we often feel like we should know exactly what we're doing and where we're going in life, I've found from personal and professional experience that it's quite normal to get confused and stuck at least once along the way. Wouldn't it be lovely if you could discover a map for navigating life's challenges? And wouldn't it be awesome if you could tune into yourself and embrace the inherent precious gifts inside of you? If this sounds interesting, you've found the right space. Today, I'm joined by a delightful guest who specializes in helping others tune into their true paths with clarity, wisdom, and grace. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. All my friends are on great trajectories. With work, most of them have partners and a few have kids already. I have an okay job in the restaurant industry. It's fine, but not my dream. And I don't even know what my dream is. Compared to my friends, my life is pretty embarrassing. I'm pressuring myself to change things, but I don't know how. What do you suggest? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Please note, as today's episode may contain sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. If you need extra support, please see the special links in the show notes. And today, I am joined by a tremendous guest, Nid Ra. Nid is the founder of the Awakening Spiral, a soulful map for navigating life's challenges and remembering your inherent gifts. Welcome to the podcast, Nid. It's such a joy to have you with us today.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me here, Carla.
Oh, it's such a delight. And before we launch into the subject of today's podcast, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you, you?
I named myself when I was 18 months old, and I'm with that very determined personality and have navigated that world of knowing myself, but then also getting very lost in fitting into the world and understand that dance that we have between what it is to live with our left brain, but also want to really follow the love of the right brain. And so for me, what makes me unique is that I am both quite clear and be very focused and directive, but I'm also have that warmth and have really discovered the softness of how it is that we gently flow through life. And that's the space that I love to be in and to share with people.
So that is really beautiful, Nid. Thank you. Just a question for you. How did you name yourself at 18 months old?
So my parents had called me a lovely Italian name, and I had a nanny who used to sing Knick Knack Paddywhack, and I just decided to land on the word Nid, as you do when you can't quite pronounce things as a little toddler, and I refused to hear another name at all. And I've never been called anything else by my family. Even in the worst trouble that I ever get in, my parents still say Nid.
Oh, I love that. May I ask what your beautiful Italian name was?
Luciana.
Ah, beautiful. Okay. I like that. I have a cousin, Luciana. Okay. So when we talk about, first off, let's maybe start with the softness that you're referring to. That softness inside. What do you mean by that?
So in our world, it's very fast, right? And there's a lot of quite harsh language that we use. There's a very strict way in which we tend to live with time and how we use our days and our energy, right? Through in a way, what the only asset is we have in life, which is the time we have to live. And when we are really sharp with that, and it creates a hardness in how we then cope with things. And so that can create those kind of protective patterns, right? To try and take care of ourselves in the quick pace, in the get things done, got to do this, got to do that. Like there's a lot of pressure that can come on us around what we should be doing with that time. What's the right use of it? What's the best way to be your best self in all of those confined time and experiential things that apparently we should do? And so that can create a hardness. And that hardness, it can also come through trauma, through conditioning. Like there's many layers in which we develop a hardness in which to be in this world. And there's a softness inside of us that just wants to be loved and just wants to love.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And I love how you frame it. It's almost as if what I'm getting is the armor one puts on, that hardness, that armor to get through this very, very fast-paced, chaotic world that can be, especially for people who are highly sensitive, it can be a pretty jarring world to live in at times. And so you're saying that you access and try to live in and nurture that inner softness, that place of, it sounds like you're talking about pure love, just that
Yeah.
beautiful, that sweetness, and a place that I dare say many people don't know a lot about.
And it's something that I would agree, it's very hard for us to always know what that is because often we feel a sense of condition in order to receive love. We're in a very transactional world where, and I was a lawyer for a while, so I was a commercial lawyer, so I understand transactions very well. And that transactional world where we think if I'm going to give something, I expect something in return. And that's not how love works. That's not how that softness works. And that's not real love. Real love that is unconditional. It's not one and then the other, there isn't this direct correlation and consequential linear experience that happens. And, my way of living in this world has been to understand that softness and how it wants to, like a flower, it's like its aroma wants to diffuse through us very softly and very gently, rather than it's not a force that meets the forcefulness of the outside world. It gently lets the hardness soften and dissolve.
And I imagine for many people that brings up a sense of deep vulnerability.
It does. I personally find that with the way that I work, that vulnerability is very easy to access if someone feels that they are in that space.
Yes, if they get into the soft space, then the vulnerability it's there because it's part and parcel of that love, that softness. What I mean is for somebody who's living in the hardened external world, accessing that soft inner world might be, especially for people who are new to it, they might A, not understand it, B, might be very scared of it. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to be vulnerable. That doesn't make sense. What do you think of that, Nid?
So I have a very rational, logical family. And for them, that kind of language doesn't really fit. And that's not to say that they don't have an experience of loving people, but it's definitely, vulnerability. That kind of approach doesn't sit well. And it's not that everyone can relate to it, can feel it, but what people do start to notice, and this is not about, as I said, you can't force yourself to drop into it. You can't say, I'm going to decide to know what it's like to feel that softness, because it doesn't work like that. And for me, one of the telling signs of someone who finds that a place that's hard to connect with is when they say, I'm really good at surrender. I go, like when you know that softness, it's hard to ever say you're good at that. Surrendering is not an easy thing for us humans to do. And so it's recognizing that it's okay to be exactly where you are. Like if that softness and that vulnerability doesn't sound accessible, sounds a bit weird, doesn't sound like a safe place, then that's okay. Like don't try and make that somewhere that you're going to, but just start by noticing if there are times or places where you can feel that inner calm and peacefulness.
A beautiful place to start. And I'm right with you in many respects. If you're, especially listeners or person who wrote in, if you are used to that left brain, more regimented world where that, linear progression in life, you should know where you're going and know how to get there and take this step A, B, C, that is that very linear, more rigid world. Whereas the realm of tuning into the self is, I don't know that it's a skill, but it's almost like starting to learn how to listen to the little knocks at your door. It's not the giant ring of a doorbell that your psyche does. It is those little nudges, those little sweet openings. And that can be really hard to listen to those if you're used to the cacophony of the outside world so you might not hear. And I know it's happened to me where I've had the nudges. And if my life is very busy, then I kind of ignore them, I think. And then I later think, oh, I remember getting that nudge and I didn't make time for what you're calling the softness, that going inward to listen more to what do you call it? I call it like the spirit talking to me or my inner voice talking to me. Sometimes it's also my inner child talking to me. What do you call that voice that can come up if we're quiet enough to listen?
So for me, it's the soul.
Mm.
For me, the key to understand and place in context the challenge of the journey that we have here as humans living a life is that we're a little person, a little human being, and we have this huge soul, and it wants to live through us. It wants to experience this life, all of these sensations, all these interactions, all these moments, whether they are considered good or bad. The soul doesn't really have a judgment. It has an experience that it's interested in. And that's what the whispers, I call them the whispers that are coming quietly through, are seeking. Like they're wanting an adventure.
I love how you put that. The whispers. And you're right. They are whispers. That makes perfect sense. I remember, well, not just once, but many times I get asked, how do I know when it's my spirit or soul talking or my intuition talking and when it's my brain, my mind just chattering at me? And my response is, unless you're in danger, and there's a bus coming and it's going to hit you, generally it's very soft, very gentle, and very just like that tiny little knock, and you're calling it a whisper, and that works perfectly. And if it's the mind, here's my perspective, and I'd love yours, that it's generally insistent and nagging and almost yelping at you, sometimes screeching at you. Whereas the soul, this, isn't, it's just, that's not its language. What is that resonate with how you work?
Yeah, it does resonate. I guess I have one piece that goes, because you brought up about if it's the inner child. And I do think that there is an important piece of the different parts and the different layers that might be talking to us that need care and tending to in order to hear those whispers. So I'm going to go back one step and say that the soul whispers, but they get louder. So in the shamanic traditions, they teach there's the feather then there's a brick, and then there's a truck. And so you begin with the little feather, right? Are you listening? Are you listening? So for me, my little feather was panic attacks at work. Like I was getting panic attacks. And then my brick was my marriage fell apart and I got divorced. And, that was upsetting, but I could keep pushing through, right? As many of us do, we push through. And then I fell down a staircase and had a brain injury, and that was the end of my legal career. I was, unable to work for over a year. That was a truck. Now that is my soul saying, I've given you lots of little opportunities, and we cannot see those things. It can get louder, and the situations will become more dramatic because your soul is calling you for attention in the way it knows how, which is through our physical experience becoming unpleasant and asking us stop and look. And there's nothing wrong with doing what I did and getting to that point where you need the truck. Like, it's fine. That's just the way we are. What's nice is if you start to listen, life doesn't have to get past a feather. You're listening, and if you're proactively listening, you avoid those scenarios. It doesn't mean that people don't get sick and you don't injure yourself and life happens. We all still have to do our tax returns, but it means that you can proactively be tending to and taking care. And that's where that intuition can become a louder voice that guides you towards things that would be more joyous for you. And that gives you that sense of purpose. Along that journey, you have to meet the parts of yourself that you've suppressed. And so and all of us have suppressed something because that's part of our conditioning generally in this world. We all have like the little psyche, as you say, and the things that are in the mind. They want attention because ultimately they're looking for love, but it is your awareness without judgment that gives them love. So we have to become aware of these things. And that might be inner child work. It might be, for some people, it can be past life work that comes up through things. It can be many different pieces. And you have to identify those parts when they're calling for their time to be given that love and that attention. And then you build a new relationship with that part of yourself. And that makes more quiet inside to hear your intuition, to listen to your soul and those whispers. There is a staged process. And that's why with the awakening spiral, it's not about, oh, you've done the work and yay, you're complete. It's that there's a deepening of listening that's happening. And each layer, we're deepening into that awareness of what is wanting to experience life through us.
So beautifully said. And I am following you, especially on the part where you're saying it is this process, because life is a journey. It's not, sometimes we want it to be one and done, like, let me know what to do and then I'll get there. And so first off, I'm very sorry for your accident. I understand that I'm not happy that it happened, but that you're okay that it happened and that it allowed you to listen to your soul and get on a path that does feel good to you and feels true to you. And I also agree that it's ideal if we can avoid the truck. The brick is bad enough. I've had a few bricks in my life, but yes, having the truck, wow, that's a big one. So, and fortunately you made it through it. So let's look at our listener's question. It's a really perfect one to pair with you and your expertise, because it seems as if she doesn't know how to tune into, and there's no judgment here. I don't know the individual's age, maybe in their 30s, I don't know. But having been there and not knowing my soul's calling at that age, and I actually knew it far before, but it got overwhelmed by family messaging about what I should be doing instead. So how can this individual get in touch with what is ideal for them? How can they start that process of stopping that chatter? It sounds like they have some really shame-based chatter going on. They're embarrassed about what's happening and constantly comparing themselves to other people, which never is helpful. Comparing ourselves to somebody else, we can use a comparison at times to say, "Oh, I would like to go down this path. I see that this person's happy and that feels really good to me. Maybe I'll give that a try." But if we're comparing ourselves and just judging with this very shaming,
Mm.
kind of blaming voice, it's generally nothing positive out of that. What do you think?
So the first piece that I think is sometimes really helpful is to find moments of pause in our day, just to start to make space in the mind and all of that mind chatter. It's finding the gaps in between our thoughts, not silencing our thoughts. But if we can learn to start to find the gaps, we start to step away from our thought being ourself and identifying with our thoughts. And so if you can learn to find space, even if it's the red light that makes you stop your car, even if it's the missed train that you have to stand on the platform for an extra couple of minutes, like those are pauses that if you make intentional, build up lots of gaps that you can start to then feel more space inside the mind. If you can see space and pauses in your day, you start to see it in your mind. So there's that mirror of what's happening in our life, and that it starts to happen internally. And that takes the pressure off of saying, I'm going to sit and meditate, or I'm going to sit and do self-care, right? As if we can just see where life is giving us space and time to pause and take a few breaths. And just in that moment, just be like, acknowledge, I'm getting a pause. I'm getting a moment to stop and just catch myself and acknowledge, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? And just note it, and sometimes it can help us to track these things, because often, we're making progress, but it's kind of this slow progress that's slowly going up. It's not this just nice straight trajectory. And so if you can track it without judgment, you get a bit more of an objective lens of, oh, so today I've been thinking about these things, I've been feeling these things. And then the next day I've been thinking these things, I've been feeling these things. So you can keep it very simple. And that just starts to give space, internal space, for whatever those whispers are that want to start to come through, to give you little nudges of like, oh, I'm going to go to that little workshop, or I'll go and listen to that podcast. And so it just helps create internally the little nudges that might send you to speak to someone you've never spoken to before. So it can open up opportunity for us. And so that's the first point, because if we just go straight to the mind and the comparison when we don't have space, it's confronting. That harshness is going to still be there. We need to create the pauses to give the softness somewhere to start to diffuse into our experience.
And I really appreciate this, because carrying a journal with you or using your phone as a journal and just sit in that pause for a moment, maybe just do a breath or two. And if I'm hearing you right, then you can just ask yourself a question about that pause, just an open-ended, what did I feel here? What did I notice here? And if I'm hearing you right, it's almost as if you're opening a window where a little bird can fly in. And that little bird is, a message from your spirit, from your soul saying, ah, well, maybe go to that little shop right there and sit down and have a cup of coffee. And when we listen to those little nudges, who knows what's at that coffee shop? Maybe there's
Exactly.
a person we're meant to meet. Maybe there's a book that somebody left behind and we have a chance and we get an idea from the book. Maybe we're eating a pastry and go, I want to make pastries like this. Doesn't mean you'll be a pastry chef, but maybe these are all the little whispers you're talking about. And I love how you were saying to keep this in a journal, because sometimes we get very hard on ourselves and we say, I'm not making progress. I'm not making progress. Yet if we have a journal, and I happen to love pen and paper, I have dream journals, I have journals, because while our mind might forget the progress we're making, that little book, that you keep is evidence, and then all of the hundreds of little books that are lined up they're your testament. They're your proof that you have been growing and shifting and learning. It might not be perceptible to the outside world at first. It doesn't need to be. What matters is that you feel the shifts inside of you. Does that resonate? Is that what you were talking about with this?
Yes, very much. And it is really important with journaling, not just to write and forget, but to actually go back and reflect and use it as that opportunity to see your growth, but also it will show you consistent nudges, consistent things that come through that may be either a direction of where you're going, something that there is a purposefulness to, right? So it starts to give you a sense of, oh, there's continuity that over, I've seen it for 18 months in my journal. I was journaling something that then came true in my life. Like internally, it. We all have that knowing inside of us. But if we don't track it, you're never going to discover, right? We might go, oh, I think I remember about that a while ago. But, our mind plays tricks. And it's very clever and it's very smart and it's wonderful at that. And, I think it's a wonderful gift as well to be able to see these games that it likes to play because it's playful, right? And then it makes life more playful if you can see that the mind is just trying to play games. It's not being mean. It's not trying to be in any way horrible to you. We don't want to make our mind a villain in our life because we need our mind and it's really important. And so it's just helpful to see what's the intuition guiding you to, and then what is the mind doing, and open questions. I mean, I work with contemplation and spiritual inquiry, and I love using the Gene Keys as a modality to help people with contemplation. And that is all about open questions. We're not seeking an answer. We're seeking to let the mind kind of go on its own little wandering without necessarily having a plan or a map. And sometimes we might give the mind a couple of signposts in that wandering, which is the question, which is the open question of how am I feeling? So the signpost is, oh, I'm tuning into sensations. What are my emotions right now? Oh, I'm tuning into an emotional state right now, without saying, well, I should or I shouldn't feel that. Like we want to remove the judgment. And so, judgment can be very strong, right? Especially if you feel like life is unfair. That's often the sign that you've got a very strong inner critic and judge, right? Is that feeling that the world is unfair. And when we feel the world is unfair, it tends to come with quite a lot of anger as well as that judgment and harshness. And so it's really important to be very kind with that and not try and push that kind of sense of inner voice, because it only becomes harder if we try to be too confrontational with it.
Now, I have a question for you. When you were talking about the mind, that it is playful, that it's not the evil villain, many times the mind can sound and have word tracks that are very, very devious, very critical, very harsh, and these are word tracks. And so when there is an individual whose mind has been trained just by repetition, the person's not broken, it's simply, neurobiology. Once you keep having these thoughts, are going to be more hardwired in. How would you recommend, and it sounds like this would apply to the listener today who had written in and said they have this sense of comparison and they're embarrassed. So how would you recommend that they continue on this journey of being in exploration, asking questions? When that mind pops up, that critical part, that strong inner critic, which many, many people have, it's like the first response is that mean inner critic. How would you recommend that they disengage or tame that inner critic so that it becomes softer and gentler over time?
So there are two things that I think are really helpful for the inner critic. And it slightly depends. There's an emotional piece that goes with the inner critic. So when I was saying about the angry kind of righteousness that goes sometimes with the inner critic. So if that's the kind of, so number one, you need to listen to what is the kind of inner critic you have. So when we say having those pauses, being aware in those pauses of that whatever that voice is and how it's talking, just acknowledge it. So we could just go, I acknowledge you. Thank you. I hear you. Right. That's number one, is just, I acknowledge you. Like, that's the seeing. That's the softness starting to happen. That's that unconditional love is starting to be present with the inner critic. The inner critic doesn't particularly want love. It wants to be seen. So we validate it and we acknowledge it. Thank you. I see you. I hear you. Right. That's the step number one, is we just want to be aware of what kind of inner critic we have. Then the second part is, if it's very angry, very righteous inner critic, it often needs to do forgiveness, because there's a heavy judgment and blame that's happening. If there is a lot of righteousness and anger, that there is one way. And you might experience that as, I'm a failure. I've got to put pressure on myself to compete and be up there with other people. That can come through in that, I've got to strive, I've got to push, I've got to match that thing. That can be that inner critic that is like really, really smashing you, right? And they're shaming and they're blaming you and they're really putting you down. A lot of forgiveness needs to happen. I forgive myself. I forgive myself for doing that to myself. You hear the inner critic? I hear you. I thank you. And I forgive. Really important to tap in, because that will start to allow the softness to come through with that inner critic. And it just lets the inner critic be there without trying to change or force something different, because that will create more friction.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'd love to pause here because it's such an important piece. That inner critic, which can often turn inward, can turn outward onto other people. And it can go both ways many times. And many times people will try to suppress it rather than, and it's the same when there's a part of the inner child that comes up and gets really active and angry and temper tantrum kind of thing. And listeners, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll get there. We'll get to the inner child actually next, I promise. But when we suppress it, compartmentalize it, tell it to shut up, that actually, just like any temper tantrum, it tends to make it worse, and it certainly doesn't give it space. So by simply saying, as you're saying, Need, I hear you. I understand. I hear what's going on. I hear you. I hear you. It's okay. I've got this kind of thing. That it really does, just as we say that, out loud, it softens it, and I love how you added on, and I forgive you, because that's a beautiful part of the loop that brings it into how harsh that is on the human and on the soul to hear that incessant battering. And so when you give it forgiveness, I'm getting a sense as we're talking, it's almost like putting a little bit of water on the fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for that. Now let's move to a little bit on the inner child, which is to me such a precious part of who we all are as human beings. Please explain.
So the inner child are the parts of our childhood that, for whatever reason, we interpreted a situation in a way that we didn't get to express or feel completion in who we were. And so the inner child ends up with beliefs of not being good enough, not being worthy, whatever these beliefs are, that undermine the wholeness of what that softness, that unconditional love knows of who you are. You're born with an innate knowing that you are perfect and that you are whole. And I say that there are some caveats energetically to that, but there's a sense of we know our wholeness. And in a way, those moments of conditioning and experiences that can happen in our early childhood create this whole raft of beliefs and structures about who we are, how we have to be in this world. And with that, a series of, as you called it, armor and coping strategies of how we're going to navigate this world. And some of them will be learnt from people around us, and some of them will be things that we've just learned as how we can get through stuff. And some of it could be a natural skill set within you of how to survive. And so these are not necessarily helpful as an adult. It's a little bit like when you get into an argument with your friend or with your partner, and what's really happening is you've kind of got two little toddlers who are having a fight, and there's no grown up to tell them, stop. Like, you're fighting with another toddler because we've triggered each other's little inner kids. And there isn't really a resolution when kids are having a fight until they exhaust themselves quite a lot of the time. And so if we can learn to see when that inner child is coming up, and especially, with the question from your listener around that pressure of how to be like other people, how to find how to find purpose, but still be fitting in. Like that is an inner child who knows that they're fitting in, right? They're not really but what is that true sense of joy that is coming from that person, and how they want to find their true sense of joy, but they're conflicted, right? With the conditioning, with experiences maybe in their life of how they haven't been able to fit in. And so they're trying to walk a path of being themselves while still being accepted in this world and belonging with other people.
Beautiful. Now, I have a question for you about inner child. Do you, in your paradigm, see, it sounds like when you were describing the inner child, you're talking about the parts of the young child that weren't seen, heard, given attention. Do you see there being positive elements of the inner child that get awakened, that want to play and giggle and laugh and be silly?
Very much, very much. And I sense that for a lot of people, at least that come to see me, there has been an inner child where the joy has not been set free. And there is so much joy and light that wants to be experienced. And in our serious world, there's not space for that. There's not space for fun. There's not space for play and playfulness and curiosity. And, we think of kids at school, right? They've got to learn to spell. They've got to learn to do math. They've got all these skills that they have to do. And where's just the curiosity and the play in their day? And they're running around in their bodies and exploring their bodies, being in their bodies and having a full emotional experience, and then being educated around that. And there's more of that happening, and that there is that shift starting to happen in education, and more children are, parents are being aware that that needs to be brought into education, which is wonderful that there is more of that in the world. But for those of us who are adults, we may not have had that experience when we were children. We may not have received that place where you are supported to just be a child and be free and play and discover and be your silly self, and it's so important to be silly and to have permission to be silly, because it helps us get over embarrassment, potential embarrassment, and that removes potential shame, right? If we know that we can embarrass ourselves and it's okay and it's safe to.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. When we look at the difference even between shame and embarrassment, shame is, I am bad. I am, as a human being, are bad. Embarrassment is, oh, I've done something bad or inappropriate in public or in my life, whatever it is. And they're very different beasts. And when we learn to live a little more in grace and lightness and joy, those heavy mantles of shame and embarrassment that often started early on in life, sometimes pre-verbal, where we were shamed because we might run around without a diaper and somebody says, oh, go cover up. right?
Mm.
You're a bad, bad girl. You should be ashamed of that, you bad boy. And so we learn very early on in life that if we're not doing whatever this thing is that we're supposed to be doing, if we're not like sister or brother or the neighbor's kid or someone else, so we learn that we're indoctrinated. So setting ourselves free, using that joy, and part of that, and I love how you help people tap into their inner truth, their inner grace, their inner strength, so that our radar is less turned outward at what should I be doing? What should I be doing? Scanning the horizon for what I should be doing because that's what others say, or Instagram says, or society says. But instead, you're following that internal compass. And what I love about this is when you follow that internal compass, as you're saying, what other people think or
Mm.
say matters very little because you're tuned into you, your love, your goodness, your light. So somebody might find you a little goofy or a little wonky or a little off the beaten path, but I think that's actually a really pretty cool place to be.
Well, you're yourself. So if you're happy because you're yourself, and you're at home in yourself, and I think that's the key thing is when you're at home in yourself, it takes so much of that pressure off. It releases it, but that's a process of returning to yourself and returning to who you are by releasing these layers. And there's always more of a return to yourself. There's always more to discover. And that becomes a pleasure rather than it being oh my God, like at the beginning of a journey, it can feel like, oh, I got that wrong. Oh, I've missed that. Oh, is there more? And often, that's what clients can say at the start of their journey when they'll come to me is, oh God, I got that wrong. Or, oh no, there's more, what should I do? And there's no shoulds, right? If there's a should, that's the only thing to say is why have I just put a should in there? Why have I just made this expectation, put this pressure on? It's just like you see it. And again, just ask the question, why? Where does that come from? Be curious, where did that arrive from in your childhood? And then what would it be like if I took away the should? Like, ooh, what would the possibilities be? Like, how would that look? So those are like two questions that can start to change and remove some of that pressure, remove some of the judgment. There's the healing, and often the tender part of looking at where did that come from? When did it begin in your life? What are the stories that you have in your life that are connected to that belief and that pattern of behavior? And there's lots of different ways in which you can work through that. And then, but, be really tender and kind with it because you've got to be gentle with these things. They're old and they're little person wounds, they're little, like a little child, you would never be harsh on a little child. So don't do that to yourself and treat yourself like that loving parent, and that's the reparenting kind of side that people work with often.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, as you say, a parent would never talk cruelly to a child, yet many parents do. And so I remember working with one individual where we were doing a little bit of reparenting work and we were talking about her coming home from school. And she said, well, nobody was there when I came home. And well, how old were you? Oh, I was in third grade. Nobody was there. And then when they did come home, they were yelling at me and this and that. And so the work was for her to imagine her loving parent. If she had a child, what would she want to do with
Mm.
the child? And so we did some lovely work around her welcoming the child and saying, would you like an apple? Would you like some milk? Would you like to make some cookies with me? Would you like to do that before your homework or after your homework? Would you like to go outside and play for a little first? She's like, oh my God, my parents know this is like, but once she got into it, she was able to create that in her inner world, that idea of, oh yes, I can do this with myself. When I come home from work, I can be this gentle and this loving. And someday, if I have a child, that's how I want to treat them. And so we see that in that moment or moments that it changes intergenerational patterns often, or at
Mm.
least within that generation. And the other thing that I really appreciate that you were talking about was how it is such a process because some people think, oh, I'll get there. I'll get there. I'll be myself. I'll always feel at home in myself. I'll always know the next right step. And wow, I've been on my journey for a long time, better late than never. And I know, and actually really delighted uh, to share, join with you in knowing that I'll never stop my journey. At this point, it's a privilege. Sometimes it's a little bit like, okay, here's another lesson. But in most cases, it's like, oh, I did that. No shame or blame. Just shifted. How would I want to do it next time? And then also when we're looking at the past, I also find no need, and I want to ask you about this, of shaming and blaming our parents because to me, that's a no-win. We're wasting our energy on that instead, looking at what you would do differently, doing a bit of reparenting work inside yourself. And if you have kiddos or young ones in your life or a partner, vow to do it differently. What do you?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the parenting piece, and just one side note, I love your example of the work you did with your client reparenting. Sometimes what I find with some clients is that it's not about a direct experience, and so I also use Lama Tulstromalioni's work of feeding your demons, where we just take like the energy of something. Right. And we do the same with some of the Akashic Records work I do. We go into past lives. And again, you rework a decision in a past life and how that's changing and affects your decisions in the current life. So, the use of the imagination, I think that's the most important thing to recognize here is that we can completely shift an internal paradigm of our life experience if we go really viscerally deep enough with our imagination and really believe and feel the change within us through some of these processes they don't have to be this life, this story, because sometimes they're too painful to actually really sit with at certain times. And there might be layers of getting to certain stories in our lives and experiences that we can then face. But there are often stages that we need to go through with these processes. And it's the imagination that is so key to our healing and letting that imagination be really full bodied, not in the mind. And that's one of the mistakes that I think we can very easily make with just mindset work is, the power of the mind and just visualizing. And it's like, no, it's an embodied experience. It's the feeling and because that changes the beliefs, which then change the way we look for evidence in our life of how is our life unfolding? Is it changing? As long as you're looking for things to change, and this comes to the parents, right? I do all this self-work. My parents are going to treat me differently, or my siblings are going to treat me differently. My partner's going to treat me differently. No one's going to behave anything other than who they are. And that doesn't change. We're always who we are. What happens is that as you do your self-work, you come to those relationships with a very different energy. If you turn up without your armor, it's amazing what happens with your parents who maybe have always had armor, and then they see you without armor, and there will be these periods where there's this transition phase where they kind of put their armor on and you get a bit triggered and you kind of go away and you do a bit more work. But the less you turn up with your armor to defend yourself against their armor, the less that interaction happens and the softer the experience becomes. And then their behavior, which is still the same as it's always been, it's not going to probably change particularly, but you can accept them and love them without the condition that you want them to change. And that's one of the hardest things to recognize is that our parents were under whatever stress and pressure and inherited behavior patterns that they had. And so they were the perfect parent for the lessons you want to learn in your life. That doesn't mean that they were a perfectly behaved parent or that they did good things, but it does mean that whatever they did wrong was part of your own growth and part of your own healing. And so it's a gift, a little bit like I say, my brain injury was a gift. Unpleasant things are a gift because they give us the opportunity to grow from it, to feel a deep suffering and discover what it is to hold our suffering with deep compassion. And the more compassion you have truly for your suffering, the more you'll have compassion for your parents' suffering and that they never did anything wrong. And then you can accept them for who they are without them changing and the relationship changing. And then there is nothing to blame. There is no shame in anyone's behavior because it was how it needed to be.
With that beautiful piece, and I know that really deserves that's a lot to unpack, listeners, especially if a parent was abusive. So I'm not saying that abuse in any form is ever okay. But what Nid is saying, I'm sorry, Nid, what Nid is telling us is that if we can learn to see the gifts that come in the pain. And I'm actually, it's probably true of my life experience that if we learn, I'm not saying that anyone ought to have ever done anything negative to me or anybody else, but if we're able to not be held by that cruelty or held by that betrayal and instead say, what part of myself can I free up here? What part of myself can I grow? And as you're also saying, Nid, that pain, that grief that we encounter as we grow, if we learn how to move through the pain and the grief and learn from it, it is, it is one significant upside to some of life's challenging experiences, because then you're able to say, I moved through that and I moved through it with grace and I'm stronger and I'm fuller and I'm more secure now because of it. I don't want that to happen to me again necessarily.
Yeah.
But I do have
and that's very true. And I'm definitely not saying that any form of treatment is acceptable. But it's how we can hold it in our heart and how it can change your own sense of freedom and empowerment. Is that if is how we hold our relationship to the memories. It doesn't mean we have to be in contact with people who have been abusive to us. It doesn't mean that we have to be in a relationship with someone who is unhealthy for us. It doesn't mean that you have to spend lots of time with relatives who bring out too much pain for you. You have to set boundaries. You need to respect your boundaries and you need to uphold them because they won't do it for you. These are important things you do for yourself. And that's why I'm saying it's how you hold yourself. They don't change, but how you hold yourself transforms it.
Absolutely. And even the part you're talking about with the boundaries, using experiences to grow stronger, clearer boundaries. So let's loop back. I know we're winding near the end. Let's loop back to the listener's question, that maybe she can find elements of what we're talking about to go inward, free herself of some of these beliefs of what she should be doing. Maybe it tracks back to her parents. Maybe it tracks back to her upbringing. Maybe her parents have tons and tons of judgment about where this individual is. Maybe they have none. And it's coming from maybe just this person's internal world, or maybe a quip or two that friends or coworkers made. We don't know. So diving in to all of these internal parts, following the little nudges from the universe, getting those quiet spaces so that those nudges, those whispers become more present. And because I'm sensing that this individual is on, the younger end of the spectrum, realizing this is great. This is feathers. This is feathers. You're not at a place where you need a brick yet, right? And, keep away from the truck. Yes, but yes, it sounds as if maybe this is feather time. And what a brilliant way of looking at it. So what are some final things that you might offer us, please?
So in terms of that, the listener and that sense of finding and listening to the whispers and following that, one thing I love to say is, we spend so much time living in the seriousness. We actually spend more time living in our shadows. So if she can try and start to see the the pauses, the other little things that are like little flowers in her life, little bits of sunshine that are popping up, the more you give attention to the light and the beauty in your life, yes, it will help cast light on the shadows. So it will help you see the shadows when they need to be tended to, when to get the support to do that. And do that work. Don't bypass it. Do that work. And then keep looking for those little beautiful light moments to help you keep moving forward. And that will definitely take you towards what it is that your soul is wanting you to experience. And that's not about having a job. It's not about doing X things in this world. It's about really honoring who you are and showing up, being present, and maybe working in that restaurant, showing up. I mean, I went to a restaurant once where the waiter was the most beautiful, present person. It was like having some enlightened guru serving our table. And that to me is what you can be, regardless of what you're doing, is how you're showing up with your joy, with your lightness, and feeling that sense. You know, you do that work, whatever it is you're doing is just an expression of your love, of being here and being a human. And so try and follow those things that bring you light, bring you joy, do the work when it shows up. And even if your job doesn't change, that's okay. At some point, you know, your explorations will take you to somewhere, but you're perfectly where you need to be right now. And this is so important, is just to really honor where we are in this moment. And so the way that I work is very gentle. It's very gentle work. Like, I offer a lot of free yoga nidras. My YouTube channel is Yoga Nidras. It's this deep guided relaxation. We go through the layers of the subconscious mind, and it just helps retune the nervous system and some of the symbols and archetypes that our brain has and how we associate things. That to me is like a super simple thing you can stick on and fall asleep to. And it will help you sleep better, right? You can come and join in with my free monthly calls. We do a free monthly community call where we just sit and contemplate, and people bring whatever they want to bring. And we're just open to sharing for an hour, you know, people around the world, just to sit and connect and have that space where whatever is present has space to be present. And sometimes, you know, I'll be like, let's all bring a teddy bear and we'll have a teddy bear playful party picnic, you know, so it's not as serious, but it can be very serious. It depends on what is needing to be tended to. So those are ways in which I love to connect with people. And then I also have a free quiz called the Awakening Gifts Quiz. And if you go to that, it will show you what layer. So within our healing and our deepening, we will repeat themes in our lives, because that's what we're here to learn. Is we have certain topics that our soul is really interested in learning. And so you repeat it again and again, and each time is deepening into that remembrance, into more love, more unconditional acceptance of whatever that is that you're exploring in life. And so there's actually an energetic pattern of that spiraling into that deepening. And there are gifts that are coming through, and you will have natural gifts, as we said earlier on, and some that you've learned. And this quiz will take you to where in that pattern are you, and it will show you what is it you're awakening and what shadows you need to tend to at that time. And you can use that quiz at any time to see what it is that you're currently moving through. And then I have a free library of resources that you can use that are like breath work, some are contemplations, some are movement practices, because, you know, it's different layers of our physical, our mental, emotional experience that we're moving through that awakening in. Like, not everything is in the mind. Sometimes it's in the body, and just the body needs to move. And so we have practices that support that. And so the quiz will give you those resources. They're all free. So you just pop over, do the quiz, and then you'll find out what layer you're in, and it will just start to help you process things at whatever level you're at.
Absolutely lovely. And I adore how you have like a pick and choose. Going into the grocery store and you see all of these lovely vegetables and fruits, and you get to pick the one that's right for you. Try it. It doesn't work. You want to do some movement, because when you're getting used to this kind of work, I remember when I started yoga years and years ago, my first class, I was, what am I doing here? It was a bit, felt a bit wonky. And then it became so beloved, just a part of my days, my week, my life. And so same with breath work. When you get used to breath work, then you almost can't imagine your life without it, because it does stop the noise in the mind. And it sounds like that's what you're really, one of the key pieces is help stop the noise, get in touch with this beautiful house, this body that is your home, and start unraveling some of the layers that are over top this essence that is you.
Yeah. And I guess what I would say is I see it as the body is the temple. The
Mm.
body is a temple. It's something to be in reverence to, but also to really take care and respect. And the mind, we don't need to quiet the mind. We don't need to still the mind. We want to learn to be in relationship with the mind. It's the heart and the mind want to be in a relationship with one another, a loving relationship that's not trying to control one another. And
Mm.
so it's finding a loving relationship with yourself. That's what we're doing. We're respecting, we are in reverence with the whole of this experience, and always in relationship. So it's always dynamic, it's always shifting and changing. So honoring that it's a relationship.
And a beautiful way to wind down with that reminder that it is making space for the mind, space for the soul. And I'm so used to people talking about meditation leaders, yoga leaders. Myself, I've certainly said it, quiet the mind, quiet the mind. And maybe at first we do need to, if the volume is up really, really high, maybe it does get turned down a bit at first, not demonized, but so there's balance, because that's what we want, is balance.
Hmm.
Nid, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Where can our listeners find you?
So you can find me on my YouTube channel, Nid Ra. Instagram is also the same, nids.nidra. And the quiz is on both. So you can grab that in either place. And my website is also nidsnidra.com. So very straightforward. All Nids Nidra.
Excellent. Listeners, especially if you're driving, don't worry. Everything will be in the show notes. You'll be able to pop on and find all of Nid's social media assets, etc., in the show notes. And what a just a wonderful, illuminating conversation about a different way to look at the body, mind, spirit connection, to look at connection to the body, a way to really look at how, when we get stuck in life or feel stuck, or there are little feathers or bricks coming, or heavens, let's hope not, a truck, that there's a way to really understand the experience that you're in, make friends with it, and learn and grow and continue the journey. Nid, thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Carla, for having me. It's been a real honor. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
It has been such a pleasure. Take good care. And Nid, thank you again. And to our listeners, as always, thank you for being on a journey with us. It is, as always, my deep joy, my privilege, and my delight. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And, as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.